When it comes to the TV show Sex Education Season 4, I'm going to be completely honest, I found it to be enjoyable, but I do have my issues with it. But starting with the positives, I found the show to be quite funny, especially in the first few episodes. It's hysterical as usual. You get a lot of awkward, somewhat cringy wince moments, but at the same time they make you laugh in pain as well. I really enjoyed the narratives of this series, from Otis and his journey to be the only sex therapist on campus. We also see Amy trying to find her passion in art, and then Adam, who I just really enjoyed watching him somewhat feeling really happy about himself as he gets a new job. He starts to feel really good at it and he starts to feel really happy about himself. I really enjoyed the growth in a lot of these characters. Amy, for example, as she's dealing with her trauma from previous seasons through art, and we see that she's getting better with intimacy, especially with her new partner. And then from the other side, we see Adam's dad, Michael, and he is dealing with his own issues, and he's really trying to get better, not only for himself, being a bit more revealing on the emotional side, but we also see him trying to fix the broken relationship he has with his son, really trying to be less strict and somewhat making his son feel less of a loser. I really enjoyed that. I've noticed quite a few themes that go throughout this show. The first one I noticed was the theme of loneliness. We see this through the characters of Ruby and Michael. Ruby, as she is going into a new school like a lot of the other characters, but unlike them, she has no friends going with her. They all went to different schools, and so she's going in this completely new and struggling to make friends. And what's also somewhat dampening on her spirits is the fact that her old bully is now the popular girl, and not only that, she pretends to not know who Ruby is. And then from Michael's point of view, he feels like a fish out of water as he struggles with the way they teach. He's very much used to a particular way of teaching, and he also feels like he's not fitting in as well. The other theme I noticed was the theme of struggling. We see this through the character of Eric, who believes he has to choose religion and his community or being his true gay self. It's quite a theme throughout the series. And then we have the other character, Cal, who is struggling with gender identity, as even though they dress and look the gender they want to be, they don't feel exactly like the gender they are, and we see this taking quite a toll on them. One of the main things I'm glad they highlighted was through the character of Isaac, who is the disabled character in this show, and we see that he is struggling on a day-to-day basis, but because it's not affecting the majority, it's not fixed, as it's only affecting the minority of people. And I see this as a somewhat metaphor for society, as those with the loudest of voices get heard and somewhat get their issues resolved, whilst characters like Isaac, who are disabled and somewhat put up with it, but they voice their opinion, but it's not as loud as the others, they're somewhat thrown to the side. And I think this is a case of equality versus equity, and I think we as a society need to choose equity rather than equality. Something small but I did really enjoy was seeing the female characters not being such a victim, and in previous seasons this was definitely the case, but I liked that in this one it wasn't. And we actually see a lot of the female characters being quite strong and standing up to men who put them in uncomfortable or quite horrific situations. Another thing that I found to be quite enjoyable was actually making Ruby a sympathetic character. I say this, in the previous series they attempted it, but it felt quite forced, whilst in this one it felt more natural, as they were able to make her quite relatable with her current situation, but also when they go back into her past and explore her childhood. I think they did a really good job making her relatable and sympathetic. Lastly, I found it quite riveting exploring the dysfunctional sibling relationship of Jean and her sister Joan. And what I really did find much more interesting is they didn't explain why they're like this, but we just explore the characters and how they get along together and how they are separate from each other. And we just learn why they're like this, and then they explain why she's really like this. And I thought it didn't patronise the audience. I felt it was a better way of revealing this relationship rather than just explain it. Now when it comes to the ending, the last episode, I found it to be quite bittersweet. On the one end, we see a lot of characters get a lot of revelations / conclusions. Characters such as Maeve, Adam, Eric, Cal, Jackson, Amy, and even to an extent Jean. mean. But on the other hand, when it comes to the character of Otis, I felt like it was very much a bittersweet ending, as we see him wanting to be the main sex therapist on campus, and he is given that opportunity but decides to not take it and give it to the other. And I understand where the writers were going, but I didn't really believe it to an extent. I think it felt like a wasted narrative. A character even mentions it as a joke, but I took it more on a serious side, as it did feel like a wasted narrative. But on the other side, we see Otis get a slightly happy ending, as Otis is given a letter by a character, and as he reads it, he realises that he made quite an impactful role on this other character. And it's really just nice to show that what he may have saw as just small nice gestures to this particular one, it actually did a lot for them and made them the better person that they're going to continue on. I just think that was really nice to show that his character had quite an impact. Now, when it comes to criticisms, I have quite a few. Firstly, I was really disappointed of the relationship between Otis and Maeve, as we spent 3 series really wanting this relationship to start and blossom, but once we get it, they throw so many terrible stereotypes into the mix and cliches. Now, the only one I accept is the first episode. The others just really didn't make sense, and if anything, I think it's doing a lot of damage to the development of Otis and Maeve. And then they display this relationship as quite rocky, and it only gets better towards the end, only for them to break it off entirely. I don't know why, I just think it's a big disservice to the fans. But my main issue with Otis is I felt like they made him the most selfish man-child in the series, more than usual. Now, he wants to be the new sex therapist in his school, fair enough, but once he finds out there's skepticism, and his skepticism is understandable with the previous seasons having to deal with phonies. But when he meets the new one and finds out that she is actually good at what she is doing, instead of wanting to collaborate or finding a way to help out, he decides that he is the original and that only I should be the sex therapist. And it really just comes off as arrogant, condescending, and even sexist, as she was there before him, yet he claims he is the original, and it just really comes off as quite bad for this character. You really don't want to root for him, but the only reason you somewhat do is because the other sex therapist used to be a bully to a particular character. When it comes to other plots in this show, I have to admit I found some of them to be kind of uninteresting, whether it be Eric's plot or Jackson. Eric's plot, they tried their best to be unique with these odd dream sequences, but personally I felt them to somewhat fall flat towards the end of the series. And then when it came to Jackson's plot, it started off quite eye-capturing, but after a while you just see the character being more selfish than sympathetic. One of the biggest issues I found with this series is its lack of humour. I think after the 3rd episode it really just dies and becomes more of a saddening roller coaster of emotions. Now, I know this show is no stranger to that, but I just felt like the humour was nowhere to be seen in entire episodes. Overall, I think this series was okay. I did enjoy some of it, but I felt like some of the plots weren't as interesting, and I personally found that most of the characters were quite selfish. If I'm being honest, there's no real replay value from episode 3 onwards for this series. Is it good? I'd say this series is okay. The show as a whole is quite good though. Rating wise, I would say 6 out of 10 for this series, but 7.5 out of 10 for the entirety of the show. When it comes to recommendations, I do have a few. Firstly, I would say because of its foul-mannered but awkward styled humour, I would recommend In-Betweeners. I would say Euphoria because of its way of diving into a particular character's life and their quirks, and also because of their representation of the LGBTQ community. I think they did a really good job not diving into stereotypes and really just showing them like ordinary people. And then lastly, I would recommend this TV show Skins, as I think both of them have a lot of similarities, and I also to an extent feel like Sex Education continues where Skins left off, and whilst Skins is set in uni and this show is set in high school / college, I think there's a lot of similarities, not only with plot lines but with characters as well. I feel like Effie and Maeve are quite similar. Those are my recommendations. This has been my review for the TV show Sex Education. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed, please like and subscribe, but most importantly, thank you and have a nice day.